Welcome to Boss to the Future. We have just had a huge week. If you have been following along, exciting reveals all the way around. We just made Meta Quest 3 official, shipping this year, plus a killer slate of titles coming to Quest platform from the gaming showcase. Before I get carried away with all of that, do let me introduce my guest for today, a true gaming OG, a man who needs no introduction, Jason Rubin, the Vice President of Content and Play at Meta. Welcome, Jason. One thing I do is rather than me reading your CV, which I think audiences find boring, I invite my guests to say, hey, what do people need to know about you in 1 minute? Like, what's the 1 minute thing that the audience should know about you?
1 minute, 1970 baby, saw Star Wars in the theater,
Nice.
Came out of that and said, I got to do this. I don't want to be Luke Skywalker and smack each other like my friends with sticks. I want to build worlds.
That's
so
cool.
I tried to get my father to buy me a video camera. He would not at that time. They were crazy expensive and crazy big. Managed to get a computer a few years later. 10 years after that, I built Crash Bandicoot, #1 PlayStation title. Built Jak and Daxter after that. Sold Naughty Dog to Sony. The Last of Us, as you all know, has come out since then. That was the company that I founded. I don't know. I've walked the earth. I sold a company to MySpace and worked for MySpace for a while. I've tried to acquire a bunch of other companies. I had a Facebook Canvas social app company for a little while. I've written a few comic books. Ran THQ as president. And then Brendan said, hey, you got to look at this. You got to look at this VR stuff. And that's how we got close together. And that's been the last 8.5 years of my life.
Well, I mean, it's been such a joy to work with you. I mean, so really, when I came in, I was a gamer, of course. Certainly no surprise, but I really did not have the experience on the developer side. So, Jason was really the guide, not just for me, but for so many of us in making sure that we were building not just a great platform, which is hard enough, but a great platform around which an ecosystem could be built. And speaking of extending the ecosystem, look at this segue. Speaking of ecosystems, we are extending the Quest ecosystem to the Quest 3. That's obviously, I think, a super exciting thing. I want to start with that topic. Longtime listeners will know the premise of this entire podcast is to have, rather than going really broadly but shallowly, trying to pick one or two deep dive topics and just really exploring the implications of them before we kind of maybe do some more fun stuff at the end. Quest 3 just announced a virtual and mixed reality standalone device coming later this year, starting at $499 for the 128 gigabyte version with bigger storage options coming, available in all the markets Quest is currently sold. And of course, to my point that I started this segue with, it is backward compatible with Quest 2's library, which people are excited to get access to. So sending to you, for you at least, talk a little bit more about this. The history of how we ended up with the library that we have, and the ideas that you've always advocated for having this larger cohesive ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have nearly 500 titles in the store now. All of those have been vetted. They're all of a certain quality. We curate. You're guaranteed when you buy those titles or if you download them that they're going to run at frame rate. They're not going to crash, things like that. We try to do our best to make sure that the user has a great experience. All 500 of those titles were the blood, sweat, and tears of a lot of developers over the last 7 or 8 years working to figure out what works in VR. And it's important for us and the developers that all moves forward. So somebody that's just joining in now can, go back and play all those things. Unlike a lot of other medium, stuff that's a little older in VR is not outdated. And that's still, to a certain extent, the cutting extent, some of the best stuff out there. So we don't have to redo Beat Saber. We can upgrade Beat Saber for Quest 3. It's a much better processor. It's got a better screen. It's going to be a better experience, but we don't have to remaster it. It's, it just kind of works. And that's been huge for us. And that's true not only games, that's true of our applications, fitness, all of our media, everything's going to come across. So you have a massive platform. And I think it's important when you buy a piece of equipment like this that you get the utility out of it. And this is what our offering's great.
It's probably obvious to the listeners, but it's worth calling out. You've got this cycle where, why do we have the App Store curated? and we get some critiques for this. And I think, we really pay attention to those. We really try to balance this. And the answer is we want to grow the user base. The best thing for developers of all sizes over time is a bigger user base. And if users are out there having bad experiences, we worry that's going to create a headwind. But of course, if it's too restricted, then they can't find the content they want. That's bad too. We want developers which is why we have App Lab. And some of our biggest titles on the platform are in App Lab doing really well. Some of those titles are going to make it to store. Some of them don't want to. They're happy in App Lab. So we really have, I think, tried to open it up so that developers of every size and level of investment and desire to meet our standards are able to have a successful business in VR. And we're really excited about that. So talk more about, you hinted at, talk more about this new headset. What does it mean for developers?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using it now almost exclusively. Once you put it on your head, you realize like these are the screens you wanted. This is the form factor you wanted. This is the, the thickness you wanted. It's like, it's a beautiful device. It really is a beautiful device. But a backward compatible device, which
that's right.
is very important, I think. You can choose to upgrade now, you can choose to upgrade later. And everything you're buying, if you own a Quest 2 right now, for the next year, it's not like you're throwing money into a pit that comes with you. You can still use your apps. They'll just, up-res and look better. And it has, meta reality capabilities, which is
that's right.
Incredibly awesome and totally new and different. You've experienced pass-through, maybe on Quest 2, where you can see a black and white version of the background, but this is really the next level of that. And I think a big part of the future, of the reality devices that we're building.
Yeah, even going from Quest Pro, which I love my Quest Pro. I use it all the time. I'm a huge fan of the open periphery, in particular, just for the way that apparently my eyeballs are sweaty. I don't know. I love that open periphery. Keep things a little bit cooler for me. Even going from Quest Pro, the meta reality on Quest 3 is even better. We have more high-res color cameras on board, 2 4-megapixel color cameras. It was designed to have a much clearer mixed reality experience. We learned a lot from the Quest Pro and how people reacted to that and how we built that. We're kind of glossing over probably the most important thing to most people, though. Talk about what are they going to get with. So it's a slicker form factor. It looks great. The meta reality is there, and I think that's an important feature. What are they going to get for this extra processing power that is in the device? So give us a sense of what is the experience going to be different because of that?
Yeah. So I'm not an engineer, so for me it's all what is the experience, and you put it on your head and you look at a title that you've already been playing. Pop 1, for example. Put it on your head, and suddenly, just the screens right away are going to be better.
That's right.
It's clearer, it's crisper, lines don't jag, everything just looks better. Then there's somewhere in the order of 2 to 2.5 times as much power-ish kind of thing from the old days.
Phenomenal.
And so someone like Pop 1 says, oh, we have all this level of detail stuff we do where in the distance things tend to get blockier, things tend to disappear. We're going to just push that out.
That's
so
right.
Now all of a sudden the world looks more full. And they say, we now have all this memory that we can throw our textures in, make them a little higher res when you're closer to them, maybe have more things going on, whatever. We have all this extra processor. Let's add some particles that are a little bit more interesting. And so just overall, it's a big step up for developers that take the time. You automatically get the screens, but the developers that take the time to go do relatively easy things based on their optimizations will get even better looks. And then those that are building for this device, Asgard's Wrath, for example, which just got announced, they really take advantage of it from the beginning. And the beauty of all of our devices is no cable.
That's right.
So is it a PC? No, it's not a PC. It's getting so good and it doesn't have the cable. That really to me is the best of both worlds, right? And it's the best we can do today.
And of course, with AirLink, you're still, for the PC gamers out there, you're still going to be fully taking advantage of the headset's capability. The screens are really going to pop for those consumers as well, going over the AirLink capabilities. And of course, if you want to be using USB-C 3 cable, you can be, but you don't have to. So we are really trying to do it across the board with this headset. Actually, kind of one of the things that I do think is easy to overlook. You talked about the more power. A lot of the more power that we're talking about is coming from this improved chipset, but it's not the only place that we're getting more power. We've also done some really clever things with how we manage the thermals in this device. I won't get into it in this podcast. We'll try to get maybe the right engineering team back for a future podcast. some of the coolest engineering work done in this headset. You'll never see it. It's how we managed the heat, because that is the real blocker for these headsets. And for example, there's a little pinstripe running around the faceplate. If you look at the front, that's actually the vent, and we're pushing air out of that little pinstripe all the way around the headset. It's a very clever way of merging design and functionality. Speaking of unlocking more power, I don't want to be remiss. This is like turning into like an infomercial, which I don't mean it to be. I am legitimately this excited. Yeah, Jason's laughing at me. I know.
No, it's true. I'm excited too.
This is how I actually talk when I'm excited about things. I am trying to get our branded stuff right, which maybe that's the real reason it's looking this way. But the other thing that we're excited about, people are always asking in the AMAs about Quest 3. We will share more information on Quest 3, of course, as we get out towards Connect on September 27th. But that's not the only thing people are going to want to ask about. What about Quest 2? A lot of dedicated Quest 2 users out there, loyal Quest 2 users. It's a phenomenally popular headset, still even running in, this many years on. It continues to be a great performer, great seller, people with a very engaged audience. As I have hinted a few times on Twitter in my AMAs, we are going to keep Quest 2 in market for a while yet longer. In fact, we're going to improve it. So we have just announced that we're going to have higher clock speed for all of Quest 2, including existing headsets, and for Quest Pro headsets. That update's coming soon, and we're dropping the price back to $299 for 128 gigabytes, $349 for 256 gigabytes, starting on June 4th. The CPU, GPU headroom improvements are actually much foretold by John Carmack. We're just us finally having a long enough look at the realistic workload of these devices to make some pretty tricky low-level systems optimizations to unlock that extra power. So that's something that people who have existing headsets, they're getting better. You don't have to do anything but update the headset, and those are going to still be available for sale for a bit longer. So here again, you see the point of all this. It has been from day one, ever since we introduced the Quest 1, to create a cohesive ecosystem where consumers are rewarded for their participation with devices that keep getting better, with libraries that keep getting richer, with more and more content, and developers who are getting met with ever a growing user base, highly active, eager to spend money for great work, for great titles. And that is the thing that we have been nurturing and growing all these years, and quite so successfully. You mentioned Asgard's Wrath. Talk me through the other gaming showcase highlights for anyone who might have missed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that we can do this for Quest 2. Yeah, it was a big show. I mean, we have some pretty big names besides Asgard's Wrath. We have Samba de Amigo, which was a great game. We have Arizona Sunshine 2, right, which is coming out. And actually, it's worth pointing out, we have a lot of titles that are coming to the platform for the first time. But on top of that, we have now developers who have started to build a real business in virtual reality that are returning and improving upon the concepts and ideas they brought.
Yeah, totally.
And that is incredibly important. It is important for us that developers succeed. And so to see Arizona Sunshine 2 come out, and NFL Pro Era Next Evolution, it gets better, and see all these things kind of continue to get better over time, and for the developers to succeed, that is starting to become an ecosystem that will expand and last for the long run. It shouldn't be something where people jump in, they build something because they're excited, and then the business wasn't there. The business is now there for these developers. So they're coming back. Ghostbusters, that's a big title for us, and a big IP. It's kind of the first time that I think you'll have ever done this. Certainly the first time in VR, but yeah, it's a multiplayer. It's a lot of fun. That's going to be a big one for us. I mean, we just have a lot of stuff coming. Bulletstorm, Stranger Things, some big names and some really cool stuff.
And obviously, all the details of the gaming showcase are out there. I had just to say, this is one of those things where you just keep hearing these reports, and I think us industry insiders are kind of used to it at this point. You're just kind of this hype cycle process that is a natural part of our industry. But man, this thing is thriving. We got a lot of people building a lot of great stuff, and we got a lot of consumers happily enjoying it. This actually is a great transition. One of the things that you taught me, Jason, from early on, and it's a lesson we continue to learn and continues to be just almost more true over time, if that's possible, is that when you have a new medium, there is just a creative process that's not about one company or one game. It's about an entire industry exploring a space. An element that works in one game is adapted into another game. They combine it with a new element that creates a third option. Some of it's intentional, some of it's accidental. It's discovery, and over time, you build a language for how to build great content in that media. Reminds me of Chris Cox introduced me to the history of film on Netflix, which is kind of an interesting story about like somebody had to invent the smash cut. Like before that, there was no smash cut, and then there was a smash cut. There's this process of invention. Here we are, meta reality, this wonderful, ability that we are unlocking now with Quest Pro and certainly with Quest 3 for people to have a whole, not just a full color view of their surroundings, which is great. We call that color pass through, but meta reality, a programmable view. So the software can actually operate on the image coming in and identify what surfaces are, and you can put things there. How do you think about MR in relation to the developers who are building in that space? Where are we on that journey? What are the opportunities and challenges that you see?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought of this as a thousand monkeys banging on keyboards, or millions, but we don't have millions of developers. We'd have many, many thousands. And like someone writes something incredible, and they may not even be the one that it succeeds with it, but someone else says that's right, and they stand on the shoulders of giants. And we keep, I didn't create the platform game with Crash for sure. Did we grab a lot of stuff from Miyamoto? Yeah, we grabbed even more from Sonic and Donkey Kong Country, but they weren't the first platform games either. And they grabbed from those developers. And everybody understands in the industry that things continually get better. We're 8 years into the virtual reality space, and we're just starting with meta reality and the ability to show pass through and understand your environment and what to do with it. And it's going to be really interesting starting over again, because the two big things we conquered with virtual reality, and we're still on the path, we won't ever end, were new input device and new locomotion. The locomotion was the beast. Well, that's all out. There's no locomotion in the same way when you see him pass through and when you see your room, because your sofa doesn't listen to the controller. He just doesn't care. So we have to figure out now how to fit things into a world we don't control, which we did with virtual reality. And so we're really starting over. And the interface also, with a lot more hands and pointing and clicking and more Minority Report type stuff, it really is a different world. And it's going to take a while for the developer community to like figure it out. And every step is interesting and cool, just like the old video games are cool, but they're not as good as the modern video games because they're all stepping on each other. The same will happen with meta reality, and developers are already doing it. One last thing really quickly. I don't think we even understand how they're going to use this technology. Like, I hear VR things, meta reality things. Like, what are these two different spaces? But yesterday I was looking at something that a developer had cooked up where they wanted you to be able to use a keyboard or be a DJ and have a DJ rack. And it's not easy to match that to the real world. So they had a cutout that showed the thing that you needed to deal with in the real world. And everything else was virtual reality. And it was amazing because I can't play piano and I can't DJ, but I could see how you could. And when they, brought someone who knew what they were doing, you can do that, but get the experience of being in a crowd of 50,000 people around you because of this mix of the pass-through meta reality and VR. So I don't even think we know where people are going. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited about it for the same reason. I think there's some pretty straightforward, obvious stuff that we can do day one. I think, listen, for people who are new to VR, one of the common complaints that we have is they don't like the feeling of not knowing their surroundings. They can't drink their coffee. They can't use the keyboard, especially for us as we have ambitions of doing productivity work here. There's no reason that you want to have, even though you do want to have infinite screen space, you still want to know if somebody walks in the room or your dog's there, or your kid's there. So there's a utility that's undeniable. And you talked about some of the plans that we have for the user interface to be much more intuitive. For a lot of people who are not gamers, the controllers take a little practice, whereas your fingers touching a button takes no practice. That is universal. So that's day one stuff. Day two, we have some exciting stuff that we're going to share over time at Connect with what we're thinking about. And so there will be some exciting stuff that's kind of in the space of, both fully meta reality and also the hybrid. And then, there's this exciting future that we all see for developers to go and play with the Presence platform that we've built here. And there's stuff that you can do that you will be able to do no other way. It can be done no other way. And of course, this also is the next step on the path to the full augmented reality future, both in terms of how we do interface design, how we do interaction design, that those use cases are a little different. You're probably walking around more in those use cases. You're probably out in the world more in those use cases. But they're kind of early on in that space. So for us here again, on the very vanguard forefront of technology, and super excited about it. Okay, I want to do a second deep dive here because we've covered so much breadth on the hardware and what it is and what it represents to have the extra compute power and to have the meta reality capability in these things. I think it's very interesting to go deeper on this point that you have made so many times on the path that developers go on to find success in these spaces. You have a great, first of all, Crash Bandicoot is its own great story and its own has its own great oral history. But given your background, talk to the developers out there. What should they be doing? What if you were out there in the trenches, and you're you're young, you finally got the computer, you're finally trying to get in the industry. Like, what would you be doing? Like, what is the path that somebody can take to find success in the space?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume you can develop, because the question of what you do if you just got a computer and you're trying to learn is a little more involved.
Yeah.
My theory and my partner Andy Gavin's theory was always that banging up against the giant was not the way to succeed. And it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of game developers or developers in general, they're inspired by something and they want to do that something because they're inspired by it. But that something is standing in your way and it's good. That's why you were inspired by it. If it's a little thing off in the side, nobody's using it, great, be inspired by it. As I said, stand on the shoulders of giants. But if it's, if it's something crazy successful.
If it's Fortnite.
Oh, we're going to go do Call of Duty because that's inspired. Like, it is, I hate to break it to you, very hard to succeed.
Right.
So what you need to do.
Go to space, right.
Yeah, you need to find a hole to put yourself in where you have a better chance of success. In the case of Crash Bandicoot, yes, we were going up against Mario and we were going up against Yuji Naka, who actually didn't build the Sonic game we thought he would. He built Knights instead, I think because he didn't know what to do in 3D, but I can't prove that. But we did it on a platform that had no Miyamoto and had no Naka-san. And that was our hole. We said, people are going to want character platform games. So we're going to build it over here where nobody is. And if PlayStation fails, we fail. But if PlayStation does well, we should do well. And guess what? It worked out. And that was a really arrogant play, but that's success, right? Is finding that space. And so right now, there are plenty of places out there for you to apply that. But when it comes to where everyone isn't looking, the alternate realities, the headsets, are a great place to be because there's competition for sure. And the products are getting bigger and they're getting deeper. Asgard's Wrath is leading that. There's no question it's harder to succeed. But if you have a team and you're scrappy, you can still make a Beat Saber. We should have more than one Beat Saber that's killing it on the platform. And that is the road to riches and also artistic expression and all the other things you're after. If you bang yourself up against the app stores, there's a lot of competition there and they're going to outmarket you. Totally. And they can also put that stuff out quick enough that if you make something brilliant, they're going to stand on your shoulders. Right. And so
with their distribution advantage.
Yeah. And so there's this moment here where if you believe you can succeed, and we're now seeing developers that are very successful on our platforms. And it's like that magic moment where there's still a hole, but there's also, the rainbow is ending in a pot of gold here.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You're not just a starving artist. There actually is money to be made.
Exactly.
So you've got these, you've got to be inspired. You've got to have something.
You have to. It has to be an art you want to build. You can't, you can never take a creative and say, this is the hole. It has nothing to do with what you're interested in. Go fill it. That's going to be a sad process that ends in tears. But if you can find inspiration.
Yeah, curate from your inspirations. You have many you need to have many inspirations. Curate from among those, the ones that are in that sweet spot where there is a big enough market that you can eat, and a market that still has enough space for you to join. You're not running into density.
And then when you succeed, you flip that bit and you rinse and repeat and take advantage of your top dog status to keep yourself at the top of that very successful thing. And that's why you're seeing like Arizona Sunshine was for me, one of the big moments in early VR.
Totally.
There's a bus that falls off and zombies come over after this bus falls off. I was there. Like my heart started going. That moment, they captured something. And now they're saying, we have found our space. We're going to keep hammering that and make it better and better and better.
Yeah.
And that's why there's 50 Call of Duties.
It is kind of funny because I don't do zombies. I don't do zombie games. I don't do zombie movies. I don't do zombies. Of course, I get this job and I have to play Arizona Sunshine like with Mark Zuckerberg. I'm like, this is like my nightmare, man. Like I don't want zombies in the first place. And now it's like part of my job. I have to do zombies. It was a really well done game. I agree with you.
Extremely well done.
And we're so excited to obviously have the next rendition coming on board. You know, one thing that we do on this as well. We have a little time. Is we also try to get a little bit into some of the personal side of things. And you and I do have a thing that we share. We were just discussing it before the podcast started in photography. I'm actually kind of curious. For me, let me tell my story first, only because I think it's super interesting to me to think about your point about inspiration. People ask me all the time how we go about our work in engineering. And I tell them it's actually not as hard as you think. I'm constantly frustrated by everyday things that should be better. Like I'm just constantly annoyed that this thing should be better, that thing should be better, this should be laid out like that. And I mean, not just with software, with physical things, I'm just constantly frustrated by everyday things that could be better, that should be better, but aren't. And so I pick from the most fruitful of my many inspirations, and I focus on those pieces. And what I found when I got into management, and I've written about this, I've talked to this, when I got into management, I started managing people for a living, which I do really enjoy. I really value that. And I really appreciate the leverage it brings, working through others. I appreciate the substance of it, actually spending the time with people and they grow and they get satisfaction of it. But I really felt lost for a while. For a couple of years, I just was like, and something was missing. What was missing was I just wasn't creating anymore. Like I was responsible for creation, but that is not the same thing as creating. You and I talk about this all the time as it relates to our jobs today. You know, you're somebody who was absolutely on the front lines of creating a thing, and now you've created the conditions through which many, many people succeed. You know, thousands of developers are succeeding because of the conditions that you've created. And don't get me started on you guys really have Jason to thank for not having 19 different input paradigms across our platform, by the way. So you're creating the conditions for others to succeed, and you get to participate that, which brings joy, but it's not the same as creating. I took up photography for that reason. I think you've been shooting photos longer than I have. But like that is the main reason I shoot. I edit. Because at least at the end of the day, there was a thing that didn't exist. And then at the end of the day, it does exist. And it's like, it's an art that scratches that itch for me. You travel the world. Talk to me about what is your motivation? Why do you shoot photos? How did you get into it?
Almost the same story. Like I could just repeat, like there's multiple reasons I shoot photos. The first of which is, like you, I started by being a creator and I've become less of a creator. And it's frustrating because I reach my Zen state, my flow, when I'm at a computer one-on-one with something. Mm-hmm. And less I'm doing that. More and more I'm in a big group, on a call, or, dealing with something that isn't me and the computer interfacing. Right. I think that's what back in the early 80s got me so into computers. It doesn't seem like it'd be my personality, but that is actually where I find my flow state. And editing photos is that flow state and being in that creative role. And I've tried other things. I did comic series where I thought this is perfect because I can get back down to the 8 to 12 people creating something that Naughty Dog was. The problem with comics is they don't make any money. And so you split all this. And I just, at the end of it, I'm like, I love the art that I did. Okay, I can't do it. Like, I can't be just an artist. I'm also not that guy. I need to, it's a business, right? That's right. I have to see so the photography makes no money, to be clear, but it is that flow state. The other thing is I can bring that flow state with me and concentrate much more on where I am if I have a mission. If I don't have a mission in the moment, and I've been all over the world, like, go safari all the time. And I've been, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, like all over the place. And in the moment I'm there, but I'm even more there if I'm taking photos, which is exactly the opposite of a lot of people who are like, they're dealing with you have to get to the point where you understand the camera, but by looking for what's beautiful and what I want to show, I'm paying attention to what's in front of me. Like if you see an elephant walking with its baby and you wait for that moment where its trunk frames the baby between its front leg, and I have this shot on my Facebook page, and you're just waiting for it, and then bam, 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 you're shooting. I remember that moment and I see it. I'm not sure I'd see it if I wasn't taking the photo. And then I get home and I have this flow state for, I have 4,500 pictures last time I was in Africa, right? So you gotta get through that, get that down to 100 or 200, edit the 200, like that. That's a good 3 or 4 weeks of nerd rage for me. So that's the reason I do it. And with my daughters, I love taking the photos too, because again, I'm in the moment. I know it would feel like being behind the camera is worse, but I'm remembering what they look like, what they're doing. And like, it's for me, that's joy. And they'll have that when they're older and they start to care. Cause right now I just frustrate.
Oh man, it's so funny that our stories are so similar. I am with you 1,000,000%. I love traveling. And what made me love traveling was having my camera. I'm not on my phone. I'm not thinking mentally. My brain is just inclined to multitask. It just naturally wants to be in 10 places at once. And when I'm with the camera, I am fully in the place that I'm at in a different way. I completely vibe with that. And we also were talking, we have a similar kind of, our mentality to it. Like, we're trying to recreate all the editing. We're both big photo editors, it turns out, big Photoshop guys. And I'm not trying to recreate the light specifically. I'm trying to create the feeling of being there, the feeling that I had in that moment. And I like that because now I'm, like you said, 3 or 4 weeks of nerd rage addressed through Photoshop or Lightroom. I am really reliving that moment. I'm like sharpening my own memory of that moment. I'm like honing the feeling of that moment in a way. It almost locks it in more for me. And so I get to kind of experience the trip multiple times. Like for me, it's like, it's the initial download, it's the editing, and then it's the sharing. And those are like 4 different pieces for me, which I just kind of so wild that
and our memory isn't perfect. We don't remember the telephone pole that was behind our daughters, or like we don't remember the airplane flying over, leaving a trail while we were looking at beautiful wildlife. So why leave it in your photo? Yeah, that's my theory. Like, let it be the memory that we would have of that moment.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I gotta ask, we've gone through so much material. Are you excited about what AI represents for photography? Are you nervous? Like, how are you thinking about this? This new landscape of AI tools for photos.
Both. So like you edit, I edit. So clearly you kind of moved a little and it's blurry, but that was the best shot. You kind of want to clean it up, and the AI being able to go, oh, I got you. I know what that should have looked like.
It's amazing.
Even though you're really not, again, it's not the photo at that point. It's what the photo should have looked like according to LLMs, right? It's like,
totally.
Right. It's like figuring out what's going on. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with noise removal. I'm fine with like, help me get rid of this. This leaf does not need to be flying in front of my daughter for this photo. Like,
totally.
Just get rid of this leaf. I do wonder, like, in 10 years, not even 10 years, will the pictures that I've taken of animals on safari even be necessary? Like, if you want that perfect photo, why don't you just describe it, and it's going to give it to you without the leaf and everything else? And like, I don't believe they'll ever replace my daughter photography. But the safari photography, I am worried, is going to get to the point where, why am I bothering going through all this when AI can just like tell me what you want? What photo should you have taken?
It's so funny you mentioned that. What I think is interesting, I couldn't agree with you more, the implications of this. I really went back and have studied Ansel Adams and a lot of the early photographers, the F-16 group, or sorry, F-32 group, like all the different pieces, all the early photographers. And what they were struggling with was they couldn't get taken seriously as artists because the painters were like, well, it took you so little effort to do that. And so like, therefore that can't be art. And they really had to fight for photography as an art form, and they succeeded phenomenally. Ansel Adams still to this day probably one of my favorite all-time artists, and just such a tremendous body of work. And that was, I think considered one of the things that led art to take such a stark move over the last century. Was like, you just like, okay, you got to do something different. Like, you got to mix it up. Painting is far from dead. It's doing great, but it's like, it's different now because the photography existed. So here we are as photographers saying to these AI people, it's like, well, you didn't do it. Like, I had to travel to Angkor Wat to take this picture. and you didn't do anything. I'm like, oh man, it's me. Like I'm the other one now.
Yeah, we're getting older, Boz.
Totally.
I honestly don't know. I use Ansel Adams to justify doing the image cleanup I do, because what he would
was a
do
big
is
Photoshop guy. Yeah.
This is too bright. This is too dark. What if it would look different if I hit this and don't hit that?
Yeah.
Like a lot of editing over and over and over again. And people say, well, what you do with with Lightroom, that's not real photography. No, it's just better version of what.
Totally.
So like,
that's right.
Yeah, but AI, look, I go on Safari and I'm always kind of smirking in my arrogant way with my camera the person next to me, thinking they're going to get a good shot on their mobile phone. And when they get home, it's terrible. That's not going to be the case.
No, it's going to be great.
Right? That photo is going to be as good as the one I can take, and they can like half-ass it.
Yeah, totally. No, they don't have to go on Safari. You're right. I'm trying not to put myself in the position that the painters were in. I think AI is a new art form. One thing I do like about AI is it also introduces things that are physically impossible, which is very relevant to the work that we're doing in VR and augmented reality. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know that it will affect me that much because I'm comfortable with, like you said, to some degree, there's the beauty of, well, I'm not trying to do this as a business, so I don't have to worry about that whole aspect of it, and I can just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people that are photographers for businesses, and what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, that's the tough one. I think, to some degree, it's already been happening with cell phones and the increase in widely available great digital cameras. People who are, to your point about your daughters, people who are taking pictures of people are doing just fine. People who are taking pictures of landscapes or other things, it's a tough time, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how art broadly reacts to this shift. I really am very curious about that. And you're absolutely right, by the way, about Ansel Adams. He loved everything. He was one of the first people to shoot color. He shot every kind of crazy thing. He was they used to call him the scientist, because they made fun of him because he would try every new thing. He loved everything. I've actually had the great pleasure one time of watching a photo be developed in Ansel Adams' own darkroom in his house in Carmel. That's just south of Carmel in Big Sur. He had a whole script. You had little tools, like little cardboard cutouts for each part, like of how to burn, how to dodge, and for each print that he had, it was like there's a little script that he had that he and his assistant could go through. Okay, we are running low on time. What a fun one. Honestly, the real fun stuff is we get to kind of announce and reflect on the recent announcement of Quest 3. Yeah. Of Meta Reality. We didn't even get to the amazing controllers, which are both a work of art and of tremendous science. We'll have to do that in a future one. We'll get that team in, talking about the gaming showcase, talking about the developer ecosystem, talking about how developers can approach their work and finding a successful market for their work, talking about photography. We now are on to the final section, the rapid quickfire. What VR game are people sleeping on right now, in your opinion?
Sleeping on, you mean they're not playing and they should be?
They're not playing, they should be playing it.
Iron Man. I mean,
I agree. Iron Man is like, it's like you'd think I was going to give some tiny indie thing, but Iron Man is actually a great title that just should have been played way more widely, right?
It's been totally remastered. Go find a review of this version. It's like an almost 90 rated game. Go play that game. It's amazing. Yes, it's a blockbuster. Yes, it's a big IP and everything, but like it's good. It's really good.
I agree completely. We talked about your comic books. What is your favorite graphic novel?
Yeah, that was hard because like I go really deep in something when I do it. So when I did the comic books, I read every graphic novel I could get my hands on. I mean, I had a stack, not exaggerating, like 4 feet tall in my room that I'd gone through. Understanding comics was something that I read before that period, which is a graphics novel about making comics that I think is worth a read for anybody. Like that one formed a lot of the way that I thought when I started making video games. And then I'm just gonna be weak here and not mention like Asterix and Obelix and Tintin, which I started reading at 6 years old. Like Jak and Daxter is a version of Asterix and Obelix's village. Like that really impacted me when I was young, and in my 20s I started thinking in that space. And then Frank Miller's Dark Knight. If I had to pick something modern, that'd be the one. But yeah, that's kind of the space.
Okay, the last one. Have your kids played Crash?
Yes. In fact, I could go over there and pick up the PlayStation that I just bought refurbished off of Amazon, because my 4.5-year-old was asking Crash Bandicoot. One of her kids in her class found out that I made it. And so I have all the original games. I didn't have a PlayStation that was working. I refused to emulate it because I wanted to do it old school.
That's right.
And so we played it and they didn't love it.
Oh no,
It's too hard. It is too
game.
hard. And also, like, we hacked the system to get 512 by 240,
Yeah,
but it's 512 by 240 on a big
totally.
screen TV. It looks terrible.
Yeah, the TVs were not this big back then. Like the TVs
They were
a
not
lot
this
smaller.
big, and like the 512 240, like it's insanely low resolution when you play it. And they were just like, what?
Yeah, no, my son a year ago broke his leg. He's fine, and so I let him play on my Switch and play Mario Kart. And I thought, oh, this would be so fun. So I got the old 8-bit Mario Kart going, and he's literally like, "How do you even steer? Like this is like, how do you know where you are?" And this because the graphics are just. And I just remember I used to play that game hour on end.
Oh, for sure.
You know, and so yeah, it is tough when you get those.
Not only that, but Crash was known for its graphics. Like that's how much the world has changed, right? Totally. It wasn't bad back then. It was some of the best that you could do on a console. No, it's this is the standing on the shoulders of giants. Like all the things I learned I did wrong as a designer on Crash 1, I fixed in Crash 2. People looked at that and they made their games better, and it's better and better and better and better and better.
I love it. I think this is exactly the cycle that we're trying to get ourselves into with Quest. I think we've got another big one on our hands with Quest 3, which I'm excited about. Thank you, Jason, for joining us. Where can people find you? Do they find you on social media? Are you on social media? Should they find you on Twitter? Should they find you on Instagram? Where can they find your photos?
I have one photo on Instagram. It's of my feet, and I think it's 10 years old. So that's the one that you don't want to find.
Recommendation.
That's the one you don't want. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/the Jason Rubin. I think you would know. I think somebody at Facebook had the name Jason Rubin at the time, because I was there at midnight when you opened it up and you could grab your username, and Jason.Rubin, Jason, they were all taken by the same person.
Yeah, we had a Jason Rubin working here at the time. They were the inside, they had the inside job on you.
I think that's what happened. So I am the Jason Rubin there, and I'm Jason_Rubin at Twitter. That either one of those is the way to find me.
All right. Well, listen, hey, to all the listeners, thank you for staying with us. Of course, you can listen to Boz to the Future wherever you enjoy your fine podcasts. Leave me thoughts and feedbacks at BozTank on Instagram or on Twitter. Thanks for tuning in. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other.